Yeah, people are standing up, they have to stand up, sit down. I'm going to pass you to your chair.
Now, that's what I call leadership. Thank you all for being here, and I'm really honored to be chairing this and having three wonderful women who are going to speak to you about their experience in Parliament, but also why cynicism is not such a nice thing to take into public life. This event is an event organized by the PSA, the Political Studies Association Diversity and Equality Group. And PSA also welcomes very much participation of schools through their teacher membership scheme. And the membership is really a wonderful way of involving students as well as teachers and schools in politics analysis, I think. Okay, so I think without much ado, I was going to make a few remarks, but I'm not, because I think we've got two people who might be called in at any moment with, you know, the bells that go on in Parliament. So I'm delighted to introduce first Diane Abbot, who needs little introduction, Labour MP for Hackney North and Stoke Newington since 1987, when she became the first black woman to be elected to the House of Commons. Educated in Newnham College, Cambridge, where she read history. 2010, Diane stood for election as leader of the Labour Party and has a record of differing from some party policies, voting against the Iraq War, opposing ID cards, campaigning against renewal of Britain's tried and nuclear weapons. Free thinker and a fantastic role model, I think. So, Diane, would you?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak to you. At any minute, bells may go off, which means I actually have to go and vote, so it's not that you said anything that's offending me. I wanted to talk briefly about how and why I got into politics, what is the most challenging thing about politics, and why you should be involved in politics. When I was primary school age, every morning before I went to school, my mother would plait my hair. I can't see anyone in the audience who's got plaits like I used to have. But she would plait my hair, fresh plaits every morning with a ribbon. And she would plait my, it was always about 8 o'clock, I would listen to the news on the radio. And you'd hear about wars and strikes and Parliament. And I just got very interested. And I used to think, if I was Prime Minister, I would do this. If I was Prime Minister, I would do that. This was an 11-year-old girl with her hair in plaits and ribbons. But I've always been engaged and interested in politics from, as I say, a very young age. No one in my family is involved in politics. Both my parents left school at 14. My father worked in a factory, my mother was a nurse. But I've always been interested and enthused. I went to what was grammar school. I went to Cambridge. I was a bit put off, to be honest, by student politics, because it seems to be full of really careerist people who seem to know what they were doing. But what Cambridge did for me, actually, was coming from what was a very working class Jamaican background and going nearly 30 years ago to one of Britain's top universities, made me understand what an unequal society we have. And it actually made me think that I wanted to work to make society fairer and more equal. So I came down from Cambridge, I was a career civil servant, I went into the media. Then I did something which was unusual even then. I became a local councillor. At that time, I think you could count the number of black women councillors in the country with one hand. I went on the council in 1982. And then I got involved in campaigning around various issues, policing, women's issues, stop and search. And finally, I got selected for Hackney North and Stoke Newington. And it wasn't easy getting selected, and it was a shock to many of the people in the party that I got selected. But I did get selected. And then in 1987, I was the first black woman ever elected to Parliament. So how did I get into politics? Because I cared, because I wanted to make things different, because I was prepared to step forward when other people weren't prepared to step forward, and because I suppose in a way the time was right. But I didn't get into politics because anyone helped me. I didn't have mentors. Got a lot of hostility from my own party at that time, because I was seen as this dangerous left-winger. I've addressed meetings to young people before, and they said, but no one's told believe that there's something we want to do and something we want to achieve. So yeah, what is the most challenging thing about being in politics? I think the very difficult lives that a lot of people face. Not even you guys here, but you know, I represent Hackney, where Marilyn also lives, and was a councillor there. And people of all communities, particularly women actually, often live very sad and desperate lives in horrible housing conditions. And as a councillor and then as a member of parliament, you're able to help some of them, and you're not able to help all of them. And that's the challenging thing, I think. What miserable lives people live and the changes we need in society so that everyone has the kind of chance that I had in the end. So why should you be back in politics? Well, people say to me, oh, I'm not interested in politics. They're all the same, I'm not interested in. Well, first of all, almost everything you do, whether it's the water that comes out of your tap, whether it's the state of the roads, whether it's how much money your teachers get paid, whether it's what job opportunities will be available to you when you finally leave university, are the result of a decision a politician has taken. Almost everything you experience, from morning to night, is the result of a politician here, or possibly in Europe, the decision they've taken. So don't think, if you don't care about politics, politics doesn't care about you, because politics is going on anyway. And what I've said for 30 odd years, politics, and all due respect to some of the people realize, politics is too important to be left solely to middle-class white men. It's too important a subject just to be left to a group of people who think politics is correct. Politics is for all of us. And actually, if we want the best possible politicians in all parties, we need to draw from the entire community. So if you want better politicians, actually, you have to consider whether you yourself should step up. So first of all, politics affects everything. Secondly, if you want the best quality of politicians, you've got to draw from a much wider scope of people than we currently do. And thirdly, you know, in the 21st century we're going through such difficult times, and we need a parliament that looks like Britain, taking decisions on behalf of Britain. I remember when this coalition came in and abolished educational maintenance plans, a lot of young people in Hackney were shocked. They didn't understand that anything politicians could do would actually affect them. But this was something that politicians did, and literally within months, it had affected them. And I think that's the first time people realised that politics related to their lives and what happened. And the thing to say about politics is this, that if you as young people, or if you as people from certain communities don't take an interest in politics, politics won't take an interest in you. Politics is a machine. What you put in is what you put out. Politicians now pay more attention to people that actually vote and pay attention than they do to people that don't vote and don't pay attention. So I would say, number one, try to understand politics. Number two, don't believe it's irrelevant. Number three, use your vote. Number four, if you've got friends, even if they're friends that want to get involved in student politics, try and encourage them, try and be there. Sometimes people say, well, aren't there more black and ethnic minority or women candidates? Because what if we turn up at a meeting you're supposed to vote for a candidate, and there's hardly any people there that look like you? So join, turn up, vote. Well, I'll tell you what parties to join. That's not what I do. I don't believe in that. I believe in telling people to understand, try and get involved, at the very least use their vote. And the final thing I would say, because I want to keep most of the time, and we may have to go and vote at any time, is this. That I understand why people are cynical about politics. I understand why people think that politics is just a funny group of men and it's got nothing to do with them. But you have to believe in yourself. In a way, to be a good politician, you have to believe in something. I don't know what it is. Maybe your thing is the environment. Maybe your thing is international development. Maybe your thing is transport. But you have to believe in something, and you have to believe in yourself. And finally, I'll say an anecdote, which some of you may have heard, but it's this. I was elected in 1987. It was a huge shock. Lots of people that black women could be elected. I was the first black woman ever elected to British Parliament. And that Christmas, I went home to Jamaica. I was actually born in London, my family's from Jamaica. So I went home to the village where my parents were born. It's a little village in the hills of Jamaica, and it's called Smithville. And the footprint of Smithville is not much bigger than this building. There are fields, because most of the people are agriculturalists, but it's a very small, tiny, dusty little village in the middle of rural Jamaica. So, Christmas Sunday, I went to church with my uncle, Frederick Lawrence, and my other uncle, Charlie Brown. So we're in church, service finishes, and the church elder, who's a lady called Sister Kate, comes to the pulpit. She announces the choir, she announces the Bible reading class, she announces the women's sewing circle, and then she says, "And I'm delighted to see you. Now we have in the audience, in the congregation this morning, a MP, all the way from London in England, little Lucy's daughter." Because in those tiny rural communities, what matters is not whether you've got a suit or you've got a mobile phone, it's whose daughter or whose granddaughter you are. And I stepped outside the church in the middle of little dusty Smithfield. I suspect none of you have heard of it, in the middle of the Green Hills of Jamaica. I stepped outside the church, this woman rushed up to me. Small village, everyone knows her. She said to me, "When I hear that a black woman become a MP in England, I was so proud. But when I hear that a black woman become a MP in England, I know it was someone from Smithfield." those people in those rural communities believed you could leave their rural villages and you could conquer the world. And you need to believe the same thing. Thank you very much.
Wonderful and also very much so that's great. Our next speaker is Christina Dykes. Christina is not going to be speaking, I've been told, on behalf of the Conservative Party, but is a Conservative leadership specialist whose brief has included making the Conservative candidate list more diverse. Her passion is, I've been told by her, a perspective on diversity, and she's currently Senior Advisor to the Attorney General, Dominic Grieve. As the first head of the new development department at the Conservative Central Office, Christina pushed for the sourcing and introduction of greater diversity into Conservative parliamentary candidates list, which is quite difficult, I think, to do, or at least to get to know about even. So it's great that she'll be talking about that. And Christina is also instrumental in founding the Conservative Muslim Forum. So,
thank you. Do you mind if I sit down? Because I'm not as good as Diane. And certainly, if I wave my hands around, I'll probably fall off the stage. So forgive me if I have to sit down. I was minding my own business yesterday afternoon, and I suddenly got this telephone call. "Christina, can you help?" And as soon as you hear, "Christina, can you help?" you know you're in for something. So I said, "Why?" And I have to say, the first thought I had, it wasn't for me, it was for my boss, Dominic. And they said, "No, it's for you. We want you to come and talk to these people." And I said yes, even though I knew I couldn't prepare, because I've been at a seminar all day today on the First World War, so if I'm breaking to the First World War, forgive me. And I had to present a paper there, so I've come to give you, actually, my heart. Because it's not prepared, it's not worked on, it's not glossed, it is what I believe in, because I've got nothing else to fall back on. But before I start, how many of you agree with Russell Brand? That Russell Brand, who of course said there's no need, don't bother to vote. How many of you agree with it? How many of you don't? Oh, should we all go there, girls? You all be carrying. Really? Because actually, when I heard Russell Brand saying that, first thing I thought of, this is a bit of a gimmick. Second thing I thought of, how sad. Someone who can communicate with younger people, probably better than me, giving that message that the politicals don't bother because it doesn't matter if you vote. And actually what I want to turn my attention to after Diane's excellent speech is to say why the political system really does need you. Now I'm here because I believe in democracy. And let's get all the sort of barriers out of the way. I'm white, middle class, I went to public school, what else do I like? I like tapestry in the evening, I'm as dull as a dude. So what am I doing here talking to you? And I'm here because I passionately believe in democracy. It's not the greatest system in the world. Winston Churchill said this. He said, not the greatest, but the rest are all even worse. I believe, as Abraham Lincoln said, that government is for the people and by the people. In fact, let me quote, I did manage to get that out, that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish on earth, in the great Gettysburg Address. But democracy can't be for the people, by the people, unless you all muck it, unless you actually do, as Diane said, actually do it. And that's what I built, what little political career I had, on diversity. Now, I have to say, it was not the most popular cause in the Conservative Party in the late 1990s. I could have made my life a lot easier if I decided to dedicate myself to privatising the National Health Service, or suggesting that we are going to cut taxes. But I didn't, because I don't believe that. What I do believe is in democracy, and I believe that our democracy should be and can be open to all. And it was my interest in diversity which led me to become Director of Candidates in Conservative Central Office. And I only had one aim. That was to open up the political system to as many people as possible. So when I talk about diversity, yes, I'm talking about gender diversity, I'm talking about religious diversity, I'm talking about colour diversity, but I'm also talking about class diversity, I'm also talking about disability, any diversity you want. Democracy should be open to all people. Now that's easy to say. And we've all gone to parties, when you've opened the door, you've seen a sea of people, you don't know anyone, you want to die, you want to go home, you don't want to be there, someone comes along and says, don't come in, Christina, come in, here's a drink, and then you're left. Now that's what my experience of the political parties were in the last decade. Yes, they said, oh, everyone can become politicians, everyone can do this, that, and the other. But when it came down to it, what help was being extended? What encouragement was being extended? How did you go about it? Now, I agree with Diane. Unless you want to do it yourself, you're never going to get there. Because being a politician takes a huge amount of hard work, huge amount of resilience, huge amount of faith in yourself, and the utter belief that if you want to do it, you can do it. And unless you have that, go and pick another career. It'll be easier, frankly. But if you've got that feeling, if you've got that passion, for example, like Diane has, that I wanted to change something, then come into the political system. Now, I was very aware that someone from my background, it was much easier. I can't define it, but it was because I understood the language of power that I knew what to do. And I call it the silent language of Westminster. Now, if you have never come to Westminster, if you don't understand what leadership is all about, then how do you suddenly become an MP? You know, it's not easy. There's no little advert in the, wherever, sort of in the paper suggesting that you apply. You have to push yourself forward. But you have to see how to do that. And one of the things that I'm really keen on is people like me being the bridge to other people to encourage them, to tell them what to do. And that's so important with diversity. Because you believe you me, the traditional candidate of the Conservative Party knows what to do. They've been brought up on it, in their mother's milk they know what to do. And they will go on doing it. So unless we can encourage others and show them the way, then we won't get that diversity. So when I became Director of Candidates, I had to do something. One of the first things that I realised was that if I wanted diversity, I wanted good quality candidates. Because this is something that might distinguish me from other parties. I actually don't believe in positive discrimination. I make no apologies for that. I might have benefited my own career if I had done. And the reason why I don't believe in positive discrimination is I don't want to push someone forward into a position of political leadership unless they have the skills, the desire, and the energy to do it. Because chances are that person will be uncomfortable, they won't give us the right leadership, they might fail, and then the whole course of diversity is set back. So I'm afraid I don't believe positive discrimination, but I firmly believe in positive affirmative action to help people find the way forward. Whether that is mentoring, whether that is support, whether that is actually providing special one-to-one tuition, encouraging others to open doors. It all has to be there to allow that person with the drive, the competence and the ambition to move forward to become a political leader. As I said at the beginning, we need you. We need to open up the governing classes to all people because this is the representative democracy and it can't be a representative democracy if we only represent a portion of it. Secondly, we need to improve political ability. And I'm sorry to say this, but the political leadership has not been as good as it might have been in previous years. Obviously, no one in this room included. There has been a feeling that the political classes are out of touch. There has been a feeling, and indeed I think with some evidence, that some MPs, and no one in this room, has not necessarily gone out and connected with everyone in their constituency. That needs to change. And lastly, I will say, well not lastly, I've got one more thing to say. Also, there has been too much what I would call bad legislation. We need legislation to be relevant. We need legislation to be built on opinions of people who actually know what they're talking about. And my final comment is one of the big problems, as I come back to where I started, is people like you are not necessarily voting. If you don't vote, then you cannot hope to change things. It was the Duchess of Windsor who said, never explain, never complain. Well, I'm going to sort of paraphrase that. If you don't vote, you can't complain. You have to get in there, you have to understand the politics, and you have to vote. And then perhaps the whole relevance of politics will, as Diane says, become more open to everyone. So I'm not here to ban a conservative drum. I'm here to encourage you, to pray that you will all think that a political career is for yours to have, because it is. It does take that push that Diane talks about, it does take energy. But if you do it, I can guarantee you will have a fascinating career with the satisfaction you are helping others. Thank you.
Our final speaker before we open the forum to questions is Baroness Hussein-Ece. She's the Liberal Democrat peer, but she's also the spokesperson for gender and equality in the Lords, so a very important role and very appropriate to this meeting. Meryl originally studied art history and fine art before going to work in local government. But she was also a councillor for 16 years in 2 London boroughs, and I think from listening to what Diane had to say, it's really interesting to see how you get up to being, in Parliament through local government and local politics. She was she was a councillor in Hackney and Islington, and then in North London. Meryl's also, she subsequently worked for Islington Council's Race Equality Unit, where she went to work as a senior manager in the National Health, and then she went to work as a senior manager in the Health Service. She was also a commissioner at the Equality and Human Rights Commission until last year. And she's, I think, like Diane Abbot, the first secretary? Turkish background. Person with Turkish Cypriot background elected now.
I also believe that you are somewhat connected to Tracy Emin.
So we've got popular culture, art, and politics all in one. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sharina, and well done for that. Not many people know that, but Tracy is my cousin. Well, thank you very much. It's really good to be here, and it's such a packed audience as well. The fact that you're all here, which are interested in politics, actually makes me feel very good. There's a warm glow here. So when I talk about politics, if I say politics, even to my own children, they tend to roll their eyes and say, we're not interested in politics. And as Diane said previously, politics is everything. Everything that affects you in life. And I used to say this all the time when I first stood for election as a councillor, local councillor in Hackney, where I first met Diane. She was the MP there. And we got to know each other. This is over 20 years ago. People used to say, I'm not interested in politics, or I'm not going to vote because I'm not interested. And I say to them, do your children use the schools? Yes. Are you interested in your street? Yes. Are you interested in the parks? Are you interested in nurseries? Have you elderly parents? Are you interested in what's going on in the health service? And the answer to that, if your answer is yes to any of those, then you are interested in politics, because politics affects your life. That's how I got in. I mean, I came from a very ordinary background. My parents were Turkish Cypriot. They came to this country in the early 1950s as migrants. I went to school in Hackney, a very working class, very hard-working, working class type of family. And coming from a Turkish Muslim background, I was never expected to go to university, to get involved, to do what I do now. And I just remember when I first decided I wanted to stand for the local council, and I remember telling my parents, they were absolutely shocked. I couldn't believe it. It's like I could have said, I might as well say I'm going to the moon on a mission, rather than standing for local council. And people said to me, why isn't your husband doing it? Why are you doing it? And these people in my family and people around me, it was unthinkable that somebody from my background would actually stand for local council, because nobody from a Turkish background ever had in that part of the world. No woman had. It was right for the men to do it. So I got involved because I was involved in local activists. I was a community activist. I was really interested in helping women in my community. Diane's described, if you look around you, if you care about your society, you care about the plight of women and other underrepresented groups, people who are socially disadvantaged in your community, then that spurs you on. You want to do something about it. You feel the injustice. And I always used to feel that. I always used to say things just not fair. I always thought life wasn't fair, society isn't fair, very unequal. And I remember I became a school governor when my kids went to school in Hackney. And, it was at the time when Hackney was still very, very working class, very diverse, lots of ethnic minorities and black young people and families, and quite a few sort of white middle class families moving into the area. And I noticed the governing body became dominated by white, nothing against white working middle class people, but they weren't representative of the school. They were dominated, and of course their kids were doing better because their parents were more involved in the school. They're the ones that had the parents turning up at the school to see the teachers, to demand why they weren't getting extra homework or why they weren't doing better. And I found that many of the Turkish parents particularly didn't have that confidence to go into the school, didn't go to the parents even because they didn't have the language skills. So their kids just didn't do as well. They were, falling way behind. And a lot of them were coming to me when they had problems because I could speak to them in their language. They were coming to me and saying, look, my children are not doing well, they've been excluded from this, or they're not being helped. And it really spurred me on to say, I raised this obviously with the head of year, whatever. But it's a result of that somebody said to me, well, have you ever considered being a councillor? I said, oh no, I'm possibly doing that. It's outside my complete sphere of thinking at the time, even though I was in my 30s. I said, no, so you really should go along. So I thought, okay, I'll go along. And I got really involved. I looked around at the councillors that were there already, people that I met who were already in the council. I thought, well, actually, if they can do it, I'm sure I can. I wasn't being rude to the people there, but they weren't exactly, Stephen Hawking. I mean, they were just ordinary people like me. And I thought, if they can do it, I can do it. That's what I got involved. Once I got involved, I really got bitten by this because I could see you know, the decisions that were taken by the local councils, you know, or the education committee, environment committee, you know, social services, all these committees, things that I cared about, that's where the decisions were taken. And I've been, since then, around the country, I've been on different projects trying to get more women and ethnic minorities, people from underrepresented groups, and said to them, if you're not there, you care about these things. If you're not there at the table where these decisions are taken, then your voice isn't heard. And that is just so true. And Diane said this as well, as Christine has mentioned it as well. You've just got to be there. And for people to say, oh, I can't be bothered, I can't get involved, then you just don't care then you can't complain. You can't complain, you know, if your school is not doing, your local school's not getting the funding it needs, or your local park is, you know, is not being well looked after, or your playground closes down, or, you know, all these things. They all affect you, and all those decisions, a lot of them are taken at local level. For me, I would always recommend, if somebody wants to get involved in politics, you know, some people say, I just want to be an MP. Well, I think you'll find many MPs, including Diane, started off as local councillors. It was a good training ground. It gets you involved, it gets you whichever party you choose, and I would never tell someone which party they should choose. That's entirely a personal decision. If you get involved, and you do get elected locally, which is much easier than becoming an MP, it's a good career path. Once you've done that, it will give you a breadth of experience because you'll be representing the people in your ward. You'll be dealing with their casework, you'll be going to committee meetings, you know, voicing their views. If something's going to change, you'll go and consult with them. And it gives you such good experience and good opportunities as well. So I would always recommend that. If I can do it, I mean, that's how I started. I just sort of fell into it, really. I didn't plan it. And I do get amused now when I hear some young people, you know, say they come to work in Parliament for a researcher or an MP, and they say, oh, you know, the next step for me is an MP. And I think, well, actually, you really need to go and get a bit more experience in life. I think that's quite valuable. I think the problem we have in politics now, especially in the last sort of 10 years, is that we have people, and I look at all three party leaders when I say this actually, they leave university and they go in to do some work or research, and then they end up as MPs, and they haven't really gone out into the real world, as my mother would say, got their hands dirty, done some real work in a career or in a profession before